Welcome, everybody. Robert, how are you?
I'm well, Brother Joel.
We are, we're on round 2 of this week's podcast.
We are. We did the best podcast you have ever heard or seen.
Well, it's the best podcast you've never heard, because
Oh yeah, that's true.
no one's ever going to hear it.
Never heard.
And we had just some,
Well, we couldn't even hear it.
We couldn't even hear it. We had some technical difficulties, and we're back for round 2, which will be even better, or it'll be just a disaster compared to the first one.
I'm feeling a little lost right now.
Because the first one, we were rocking for a while. We had some good stuff.
It was the best one ever.
So, just so we know, it was the best. It was our best one. Yeah.
I think it was. Allison?
Our
It was. It totally. Hands down.
Our theme song and the first version of this, I Stumped You, was Dharma and Greg.
It was, and totally stumped. It was such a random show.
I know.
Like you just pulled out of your hat.
I know. So this one, I'm going for a classic.
Okay.
I don't think we've played this one, but all I'm gonna say is drums.
NYPD Blue.
Damn. No.
Is this Knight Rider?
I'm really disappointed in you. Don Johnson.
Oh, this is Miami Vice. I wouldn't have gotten it if you hadn't said it. I never watched Miami Vice. That was on too late for me. I had to go to bed before that came on.
What were their names in the show?
I didn't. Just said I didn't watch it. I have no idea.
Seriously, what were their names? Crockett.
Davy?
No, gosh.
Davy Crockett? You sure? Stubbs?
Tubbs?
Tubbs? I don't know. Allison, do you know? Let's go with Davy Crockett.
I watched it a few times. It's kind of a classic theme song, though. Do you know who I think did the theme song? Did Glenn Frey from the Eagles do the theme song? I gotta find this out.
Could not care less.
I gotta find this out. I'm gonna do a deep dive into this right after.
Wow. Dharma and Craig and Miami Vice. We are scraping the bottom of the barrel today, folks.
Well, because somebody forgot his phone, so I had to do it in a pinch.
I did. I appreciate you stepping in.
So as you throw me under the bus, let's also
Dharma and Greg.
Well, that's where we are with this podcast. Is we need to be going to some obscure stuff.
No, not yet.
Yes, we do.
Hey,
we've hit all the classics.
But you know what I remember very well about Miami Vice is the white suit thing with the neon color shirt.
Yeah.
That's what I remember from.
Yeah. Well, and the pink flamingos at the very beginning. Remember that part?
Not at all.
Oh gosh.
They were on a boat, right?
Yeah.
In the theme song?
I'm sure. Yeah. So welcome, everybody.
You feel so much richer for having been with us these past 3 minutes.
We're a little punchy today.
Life is better.
To be on Sunday.
It is.
Joel and Rob's podcast, where we are taking a look at the top 5 regrets of the dying by Bronnie Ware, a palliative care nurse.
That was an extreme transition.
We needed to go there.
We have to. You're right.
Yeah.
But I think our first podcast, it was, I don't know. Maybe
first
I'm
podcast
just
of the series, or our first?
You're right. We're feeling so punchy that now it's like to go from being so punchy to. We're going to talk about the regrets of the dying.
Yeah, I know. This is going to be. This is going to be tough. But we can do this.
We can do it.
Because
it's important.
It is. And this is one that we've already had some side conversations about this, and how resonates with me a lot, and with you have a different angle to kind of look at it. So this is the third regret in this series. I wish I had the courage to express my feelings.
Yeah.
And so in this chapter, Bronnie is with a man in his 90s. Joseph, which he doesn't share too much, but grew up, he's Jewish. He grew up around right in World War II. I think she says he was in a concentration camp.
He was a Holocaust survivor, yeah.
And he just kind of doesn't share too much of that. Of what that was like for him.
Which very well may play into the rest of the chapter, why he restrains himself.
Yep. And he is at the end of his life. He's got weeks to days left. And what he articulates is this sadness that he never, in not expressing his feelings, felt that his family, his children in particular, never had the opportunity to know him. So he connects feelings, being honest and open with what's going on inside of you, with being able to have close relationships with his family, but that they knew who he was.
And I think that's a really important point, because, your emotions really help reveal so much about you. What brings you joy? What brings you peace? What brings you hope? What brings you happiness? What brings you sadness? What brings you anger? What brings you grief? These are all kind of the most intimate parts of who we are and why we do the things we do.
Yeah.
So when you withhold that, you're in a very real way, you're kind of withholding an intimate means of relating.
Yeah. Yep. And there's the challenge of it is to be honest and open and to share, to be able to express certain emotions, especially the tough ones.
Yeah.
So, so anger and sadness and fear, those are I'd say they're really the tough ones. That's challenging. That's challenging for a lot of people. It was for Joseph. I would say it's been challenging for me in my life. I have struggled to kind of just articulate what I was feeling, that I am feeling this emotion, and then B, the even harder part is to then go and share that and express that to someone else. So that's been tough for me to do. I've had to slowly work at that. You, though, you've had, and I've just noticed this in our conversations, you are much quicker to kind of name, yep, I am angry or I am sad, but in a very healthy way. This is an affirmation. I've sometimes had a hard time to kind of note, oh no, this is anger I'm feeling.
Oh, okay.
Because I have sometimes equated anger in a very kind of verbal outburst way and not in a natural way, which is anger's, we all feel it.
Anger's natural, and anger is healthy when expressed responsibly and faithfully. But you noted before that, we often associate anger with violence.
Yes. Yep. I think that's been the challenge for me, too, is thinking of anger in a loud, almost destructive way, instead of so I told this in the previous podcast, that this story of a mentor of mine, Mark, who described coming home from a meeting, church meeting and had the feeling of anger was within him, and he could feel it, and wanting to express it in a healthy way, he pulled over to the side of the road and gave himself a minute of silence to let that emotion rise up in him, to allow some space to say, I am angry and I'm going to feel it. And by feeling it, release it. And then composed himself, let that just natural energy make its way through his body, and then got back on the road and drove home. And it was this like, wow, what a fascinating way to think about anger. That it can be released also in a very healthy way. We've also talked a little bit about this, and maybe Allison and I were talking about this too, for me too, anger is sometimes the easier emotion.
That's definitely me.
And underneath it is sadness.
Yeah.
It's harder to be sad, and because sadness kind of invites us into a place of vulnerability, which is difficult and can be uncomfortable. And the anger it's just easier to sometimes embody.
It's not nearly as vulnerable.
No, I think Allison had said to me it was more, there's a certain kind of power that comes with anger.
There's definitely an energy that comes with it.
Yep.
I've noticed that it's you said fear, anger, and sadness. And I immediately realized, anger, I will sublimate sadness into anger. I will sublimate fear into anger quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, the fear...
if I'm afraid of something, I'll be, and this is not always healthy, but my instinct is often on the attack to go. And that's not a courage or a brave thing. It's why sometimes I think people find, we've talked about how we both address conflict. And the way I address conflict is I don't ever seek it out, but if there's a hard conversation to have, I want to have it.
Yeah.
I don't want to put it off. I want to get it over with.
Yeah.
And same thing with kind of a threat. Not really. It's not a bravado thing. Oh, I'm gonna go attack this threat. It's a lot easier for me to deal with being angry than it is being afraid.
Yeah. Fear is one of those emotions that I've had to slowly discover, because for so long I equated it with, being afraid of a monster or something. And it's so much bigger than that,
Yeah.
Being afraid of failure, or being afraid of
much bigger conceptual kind of things than immediate situations.
Yes.
Yeah.
When we just put it in the kind of horror movie fear, it loses the kind of the breadth of
That's
it.
a great point.
And so that's been also a harder one for me to kind of name,
Well, I think for Joseph, the character in Bronnie's chapter here, not just a character, probably a pseudonym for a real person. One of the reasons he said his family doesn't know him was almost certainly, the fear of vulnerability.
Yeah.
And so, as he expressed in his own words to her, he's like, I loved what I do, but I spent all my time doing it rather than investing in relationships. And as we talked about, in family systems, we end up seeing this play itself out in cyclical fashion, because a parent who does not express feelings or struggles to express feelings and emotions, children will learn that inherently, and if they grow up in a family system that doesn't express emotions, then they, as adults, are very likely to also struggle to express emotions. And we see this play out because as he is dying, as Joseph is dying, his children even convince their doctor not to tell Joseph that he's dying because they just can't have that conversation. So right up until Joseph actually passes, they are, I think it's both unable and unwilling. I think those go together here. But they're unable / unwilling to have that really hard conversation about death and dying. And for me, that was a moment when I realized I wear my emotions on my sleeve. I have a horrible poker face. When I'm ticked off, I'm ticked off. When I'm happy, I'm happy. But where I do struggle is with the people I love the most and their feelings of sadness or fear or grief.
Yeah.
And my struggle in giving them the freedom and the space to articulate and experience their own emotions as they are, when my instinct is to try and do whatever I can to take the pain away.
Yeah. Yes.
And so it like I arrogantly, I kind of entered into this thinking, I expressed my emotions. I'm okay with this. And then realized, no, there's a really big growing edge for me here.
Always. Yep. Yeah. I was thinking about joy too, and how that one also can get left off from expressing. And I'll share just a quick story. So I had this past summer, being on sabbatical, wanted to do a mental health checkup, and so started seeing a therapist, and it was a great experience. I've seen them on and off in the past, so it was nothing new, but I had been there in a while, and so much of it is her helping me to figure out what I'm feeling, to get to these core emotions that are down. And so we had a moment where just asking me how I'm doing, and I was telling a story about being at the pool that day with my kids. And I was kind of sitting off to the side, and they had friends they were playing with, and I was just watching them, and they were having a great time, just playing with their friends, swimming. And she said to me, Joel, it sounds like you were experiencing joy in that moment. And I kind of, well, I don't think so, and then we kind of dug in a little more, and then it was, that was an experience of joy, but it was so helpful for me to know I was experiencing joy in that moment, like there was something very life-giving about this. So I think we've been talking about all of those uncomfortable emotions, and those, I'll be the first one to say, my gosh, they need to be named and brought up, or else they just get buried down and come up in other ways. But at the same time, there's also those moments of joy to pause and go, this is what I'm feeling right now.
Amen.
And express it. And for me, it's just naming it.
Yep.
Wow. Got a moment of joy today.
And that is so important. I'm so glad you articulated it that way. Naming it. If it's your own emotion, then naming it just for yourself. But if it's an emotion that you're sharing with or for somebody else, naming it with them. It's telling people that you love them, telling people that they bring you joy, telling people when they bring you anger, telling it nice, lovingly.
Yes.
But expressing it. It is sharing the experience of your emotion, And
that's what really Joseph was in this chapter. He never took those moments to share his expressions and emotions of love towards his children.
because there's peace in that, and there's fullness in that, in sharing that with others. As Bronnie illustrated an example with her own grandmother. When her grandmother passed, I mean, of course there was pain and there was grief, sadness, all those difficult emotions. But there was also, she said, a very deep peace, because there was also the expression of love and care that had been there the whole time.
Yep.
And especially around her grandmother's death, when they talked about her grandmother dying, and Bronnie was able to thank her grandmother for all she had done and all she had meant. And then the grandmother, in her own way, was able to really kind of bless Bronnie. There is such a thing as dying well. The expression of emotion, I think, is central to that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely.
And it's a lesson on living well, right? Not waiting. Identifying what you're feeling. If you can, identify why you're feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're feeling it with another, for another, expressing it. Because it's in that expression that fullness exists, right?
The comfortable emotions and the uncomfortable ones. Yep. Thanks for being with us, everybody, on Beyond Sunday, Joel and Rob's podcast. We'll be back with you next week.
Do you think anybody noticed?
We're not going to note it. We're going to just wait and see.
Okay.
And have a good rest of the week.